find this exact list. And if you don't want to print it now, don't worry, it'll be there and you can go back and print it so that you have a copy and you can keep a copy. Okay. There's a 14th category of disability that's Christy's going to talk about because it's most used in early childhood. Christy, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yep.
There you go.
I'm trying to keep people from unmuting themselves as they come in. So yeah, so just quickly, the same 13 apply from age 3 through 21. It doesn't matter. So regardless of which state or territory in the United States you're in, can vary a little bit if you're in a province or in another country. But in the United States, we have a federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, and it was last updated in the year 2004, which has been a really long time for the update. And at that time, the update said, hey, in addition to these 13 categories that you just saw Julie talk through and they're on page 2 of your handouts, you can also use a phrase called developmental delay. So if any of you work in early childhood, age 3 to grade 3 almost, you might have seen a child have a label of developmental delay. It's up to each state, and then within each state, it's up to each local district.
What's the most common disability category? Meaning, we study the number of kids in schools that have different labels. Which one do you think are most common? So I see autism spectrum disorder, autism, ADD, ADHD, OHI. Good, I'm watching the chat. That's awesome. And now, if you're at home, you should do a drum roll for this because I'm going to reveal this for you. And this, too, is fun at cocktail parties, is which are the most common. Are you ready? Ta-da! So here it is. This is the most up-to-date information about what are the 13 federal categories of disabilities and how they fall, meaning which are most common. So specific learning disability is the most common, kids with learning disabilities. So I am certain that most of you come across kids with learning disabilities all the time. Speech and language only impairment, speech and language there. And then other health impairment. So that's ADD, ADHD, and then lots of other kinds of health impairments that impact students' ability to be successful in school. And then autism is the next. Those first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, are considered the high incidence disabilities, meaning they're very common, likely to occur. And then from developmental delay all the way to hearing impairment, those are less likely to occur. But some of those students that you might see in the low incidence disabilities, you might be working with students with more significant disabilities like multiple disabilities or what's called intellectual disability in those categories there. So this is just really to get you understanding what are those labels in special ed? What do they mean? How common are you? And when you have acronyms that come up for you that you'd like to know more about, you can always put them in the chat. So if it's something is not here, we can either help you now or help you later with it. Christy, were you going to say something? No?
I was telling them it was page 4 of their handouts. The handouts are on your dashboard, and you can print them off or look at them, and we'll help you figure that out. You can stay on after the call today if there's anything you want to troubleshoot around that you didn't get. If you want to listen to Julie now and then troubleshoot later, we'll help you find the handouts. But it's page 4 for any of you who found it ahead of time.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, don't worry if you don't have handouts. You will still be able to fully participate. We'll get them afterwards, okay? So now that we've heard and understand the labels, you know what they are, you kind of understand maybe what they are, and you know what some of the acronyms are, we wanted to talk about the problem with labels. And so today we wanted to...
very educational.
One thing we want you to know is that labels are real, they exist, and they're determined by groups of people, right? But there's a real problem or challenge with the use of labels. And Christy and I put this list together. Sometimes people hear the label, let's just use intellectual disability. They hear that label, and then they're constantly seeing that student as the label. You might see this when people say things like, oh, that's the IED classroom, right? Or the CD classroom, cognitive disabilities, or, right? And we not only see kids in that way, but we group kids in that way, and we find that to be really problematic. Another problem is sometimes when you're using labels, you're seeing the student through a deficit lens. So we might be saying, the learning disabled kid. That would be a problem because we're looking at the student through a lens of deficit. I'm going to pause for a second and just on the idea that there's more than one way to walk, talk, paint, read, and write. And really what we want you to do is know that there are disability categories that exist. And now we want you to lots of ways rethink those disability categories because we believe that there are multiple ways to be in the world and that their education for so long, we've made a distinction between people with and without disabilities. And I don't think those distinctions are as clear as we think. I think people have multiple ways to engage in the world, to walk, talk, paint, read, write, move, etc. We're going to teach you what person-first language is. Person-first language is saying the person before the disability. So we've got a little chart here that we hope is really helpful. It says things like, say people with disabilities instead of the disabled. Why? Because it puts an emphasis on the person, people first. Or Ella, that's my daughter's name, Ella, the 4th grade student, instead of Ella, the student with Down syndrome. Because often the label's not relevant. Notice this. I often hear that this student is nonverbal. I prefer to say something like communicates with a device because we're talking about the person as a strength. So I work with many, many kids who don't use verbal communication at all, but they might use eye gaze to communicate. So I'll say,
sounds a little bit abrupt, but oftentimes what many young adults and across disability categories are saying is, this isn't a disability. This is my identity, and this is who I am, and it's part of the inner fabric of who I am. And so it might be saying that I'm an autistic advocate, and then people are like, oh, shouldn't you be an advocate for people with autism? Because that would be person-first language. And again, it's just a trend that you'll see more and more right now. And, I never know. I'm like, well, now should I do person first, or should I do identity first, or what's the most respectful? And so I love what Julie has on the bottom of the slide, and it says, if you don't know, just ask. And so ask people, how do you like to be called, right? So if your name is Carol, do you like to be called Carol, or do you like to be called something else? So you want to, just as we would with any of our human beings, ask if you're not sure.
Gives advice. He's a philosopher. And Rabbit is organized, detailed, rule follower. First, let me ask you this. When I describe these characters, did I use a positive, a negative, or a neutral lens when I looked at these characters? Go ahead and jot it in the chat. Is it positive, negative, or neutral? Positive, positive, positive. Beautiful. So everybody's writing positive. Yeah, I agree. I definitely took a look at these characters with a positive lens. Now I'm going to pause, and you can stop writing positive if you're enjoying it. And I would like you to look at these characters and identify yourself. Meaning, if this were some kind of a test, which Winnie the Pooh character are you most like? You can also be a combination. So for me, did it catch up?
No, it's right there. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we use positive language, it's not that we are ignoring the fact that the child has needs for support or accommodations or so forth and so on. But we're really presuming competence over this idea that the child has a lot of needs. And so there's many other handouts and examples in your packet for today about how to reframe that language. Some of you are saying, well, how would I take this word and change it? So we've got a lot more examples in your handouts today that are always trying to be objective versus subjective, because even a positive word like happy or energetic can sometimes be code for ADHD. We'll say they're a really energetic child, but we all know what that really means. We want to make sure that you are still objective without judging or labeling. You focus on the facts, not your impressions or how you feel about things. And then we just do rich descriptions of where the child is currently. Remember when Julie says it's a story about right now, but there's going to be another story down the road. And so we want that story to be forever. Okay, next one, Julie. The challenge that we have is our own mindset. A mindset is, what do we believe? What do we value? Because what we believe and what we value will dictate what we say and what we do. So we want to make sure that we're very aware of our own mindset, our own values and beliefs. And so one of the things that we want to move away from is this kind of, when I first heard it, I was like, that's a really big word. It's called deterministic. And that means that something is already determined. So if you give me a label of a girl, then you've already determined what I have access to, what I'm going to think and do and like, because you have your preconceived notions. If you say I'm 50, now you have another idea about who I am and what I can do. And so one type of determinism is genetic. And so people might say, oh, you are what your genes tell you you're going to be. And many of you would be like, no, I'm not just what my genes are. I'm also what happened in my experience and my own individual choices. And so when we move away from deterministic thinking, we've allowed ourselves to say anything is possible. So we want you to leave with this idea that labels are limiting. And if we can lose the labels, that's a lot of L's, we can be open to possibility.
Beautiful. Thank you.
If you can't see it, I'm going to just quickly describe it. These are onesies for babies, and they were in an airport store. And the girl onesie says, I hate my thighs. The boy onesie says, I'm super. And it's just this idea that from birth, we start labeling and positioning people based upon just their gender and their mindset. So Stuart Schenker is a thinker and researcher that I follow a lot, and he says that our challenge is to move beyond thinking something determines what kind of person you're going to be or what kind of personality you're going to have. So yeah, there, now Julie, go.
That's beautiful. And what a message. I see people putting comments in the chat. What a message to be starting children out with, right? So we've got to really be the carriers of the light, the people that help students see that anything is possible for them, and the people that when talking to other people are using positive professional language about our students. So we've got time for a couple questions session. So just jot your words. I see a lot of thank yous. I see awesome, reframing. Oh, beautiful. Nice. We are so happy. I feel tearful when I look at these words. You've joined us because this is a group of humans that pull on our school systems, especially. Thank you next week. Prior to that, we will help you work